Right, we're going to take a look at this Metalsub HID200. The Metalsub HID200 is a relatively old light, probably 20 years old or something like that. Obviously most lights now changed to LED modules. There was two HID models, the the HID126 and the 200. This is the 200 model. The main issue that you will get with this light is the power cable will break at some point. So inside the cable there's two wires, obviously a positive and a negative wire, and they will generally break somewhere around the gland up here where the cable is moving around, and eventually one of the two wires will part or not, as the case may be. The other issue that you can get with this light is the switch rotating bezel here. Inside there is a magnet, and if this is not washed correctly or over a period of time, the magnet will start to corrode and expand, preventing this from rotating, which on this light this is doing exactly that. I can't turn it properly, but something else has happened there. Obviously this has been opened by the end user, as this gland is not tight. It's not too much of a problem. The HID bulb, there's sort of a misconception that these bulbs blow easily. That's actually not the case. Most of the time, or 99% of the time, this bulb is not the fault. So if your light is not working, not so interested in this bit, the LED at the bottom of the light here, this will indicate whether the light will be working or not. So this is a power indicator. So a 12 volt supply from the Metalsub battery will come through the light here. If this turns on, and there's a circuit board in here, if this bit works, then we would look at this end. If this bit is not working and the light is not coming on when we're turning it on, it's either the switch circuit board, the switch, or the power cable. So we'll have a quick look at the light. As I say, generally I tend to leave this bit alone, which is not a bad idea, but I will show you what's inside just so you know. But if you do a repair on this particular light, do be careful, because I can't get spares anymore. So if you do any damage to the light, we may not be able to get some spares. Anyway, the spares we can obtain is the switch magnet, which is fine, and the power cable. The power cables are used on all Metalsub lights, so that's not an issue. So that hex bolt there, that will just undo, relatively straightforward, and you can slide this off the end of the cable, and there's a ball bearing in there which is got in the wrong place, which is probably why it didn't work. And then they've got the switch magnet here. This has just got a latch onto it here, and this is the magnet inside this bezel, and this is actually working fine. But if water gets into this over a period of time, the magnet will corrode, start to expand, and you'll see a bulge on this bit here, and it then becomes very difficult to turn here. So I suspect this fault is got nothing to do with that. It's just that when he's opened this, it's just gone back together slightly incorrectly. Now the strange thing with these particular lights, or not necessarily strange, but one of the protection part of the light was that if you apply power to it, the light won't come on immediately. With this light, you need to turn the switch fully off into the off position, and then you can then turn it back on again. So if the light was on and you disconnected the power and then you reconnected the power, the light would not come back on again. So I'm just going to get a battery pack, and I will go into Metalsub battery packs on another video. Connect the light to it, assuming that they haven't done anything to the thing, to the cable inside. So I'm going to turn the light completely, so now we can see the light actually does come on. There's a green LED, which means there's power to the thing, and I can turn the light completely round, and I just want to make sure that it's going off. So that's the off position, and that's the on position. So if the light is in an on position and I disconnect the power and I then reconnect the power, you can notice the light doesn't come on. I need to rotate the switch into the off position and then switch it back into the on position, and then the light comes on. Obviously there's no light coming out of this bit here, but the customer has changed the bulb here, which probably may or may not have been a problem. I don't think that was the problem. The original problem was just the switch wasn't rotating. So the light is actually working, so that's a terrific sign. I'm going to start by putting the gland back together again. The only trick on here is, this is not a great idea to adjust this gland. It doesn't need to be over tight, but the cable needs to be in the correct position. So this cable goes inside here. If the cable is pushed inside too much, then that can stop the switch from rotating around. And I will show you a switch, just so we can see. So we can see the switch is working, which is terrific. And then all we've got to do now is put that into the right position, and that will work. So we can reassemble this thing. So once we've got that into the right position, this part, this latch needs to be in the correct position here. So we now got to be slightly careful how we reassemble the light, because it needs to be reassembled in the correct position. So you can see that bulb there, that latch there goes to there. The ball bearing goes into this part here, and the spring goes into there, and then we put that back together again in that position. And then we can lock the top back off again and refit the hex bolt, which is relatively straightforward. Again, don't over tighten those, we just round them off or whatever. Now we can then test this again, that this part is working. And the light is coming on. It's difficult to see some. So the power light is coming on, so that means that the switch circuit is working, and then I can switch it into the off position and the light goes off. So that's working correctly. The other thing to note on this one, if I switch this fully on, then the light's only working at half power. So actually the full power is to the first lock position. Again, this is a design issue, so that the light goes all the way off. You turn your light to the fully open position. That runs the light at half power, and then once you're actually on your dive or whatever and you want the proper power, then you can turn it back into that position there. Again, it won't go off, it won't go into the off position unless you pull the latch back. So that part's working absolutely perfectly. So on this occasion, I know the end user has changed the bulb here, so I'll just talk you through changing the bulb on this. Undo the bezel here, pop that out, and you can see the bulb inside. Now obviously we can't touch these bulbs with our hands, so it's a bit of a trick to get them out. Now it's a bayonet fitting on the bulb, so what I tend to do is I put a screwdriver in onto there and just turn the light or the bulb just a tiny quarter turn that way, and it will rotate round. I then use a pair of pinchers to go around the bulb housing and just pop the bulb back out again. Oops. And the bulb will come out hopefully in one piece. Now I can see on this one the bulb is actually snapped at the bottom. Probably can't see on the video on here. What I suspect is when the bulb has been fitted, it's not been fitted all the way home, and when this lens has then been pressed onto there, it's actually pressed onto the bulb. And this is a genuine Phillips bulb, so that's all pretty good. What unfortunately the customer has supplied me another bulb. So the bulb itself is a D2S bulb. When purchasing the bulb, I would suggest you spend a reasonable amount of money. I've seen eBay or internet bulbs 2 for £10. I wouldn't spend that at all. I think a bulb is going to cost you between £50 and £80, so it's probably worthwhile getting that. Now again, I've spoken to the end user on this one, and they purchased this particular bulb from Halfords. These bulbs are used in many car headlights, not so many now obviously because they've gone to LED. So we can just gently put the bulb back into place, again without touching the bulb as best we can, and it will just rock into the position. And once we're into the position, then we can lock that off into the lock position, and that's the bulb inserted correctly. Now the trick is going to be, will it now work? So I'm going to reattach the battery. So obviously the light's off into the off position here. Turn that into the on position, and the bulb is now not working. So we will just change. I don't know whether he has tried to fit this bulb and it's blown the bulb or not, so I'll take that off again and do that whole process again. So let's just rotate that round. That's reasonably okay. Take my, pull that out and gently roll that onto there, and you can see the locking latches and the fits in there. and they obviously go into this particular area here, and that's got to fit onto there correctly. So that bulb is not working, so I will find another one. So this one I'm going to take out of actually my head, my spare head. This is my test head. Pull the bulb out. This is actually a Phillips one, so again I'd recommend the Phillips one as opposed to a cheaper source of them. It's just that they tend to work. Pop the bulb in, lock it into position. That's all into position. I don't need to reassemble the light for testing purposes. Again, you don't want to leave them on for too long, but they are very robust, these things. They're more robust than you think they are. So we'll reconnect the battery pack now, like so, and switch the light on into the on position, and nothing's coming out of there. So we've either got two bulbs which have gone, or something else has been damaged. Right, so now we're going to have to strip the light down and find out whether it's a bulb issue, whether the igniter's gone, or something's changed inside. So I'm going to pop that back on just for a moment and strip the light down a little bit further. Again, this is why if you start the repair, then you can quite quickly make the situation worse if you get something slightly wrong. So, oops, open that back up again. Got the ball bearing and the spring, and the latch is all there. That's all okay. Now we can open the light a little bit more. So again, we can open this up and you get to see a bit more inside the light, which is quite good. And we'll open this up. And this is why I will say to you, this is probably something you don't want to do yourself. There's a little bit of a fine art to all this, so these particular, I mean, many of the Metalsub lights, yes, you can change the power cables and things yourself quite easily, but this one is a little bit more fiddly. As I say, it's a 20-year-old design, so things have got a little bit easier with the Metalsub range. And we can see our lights in here, so I'm just going to unsolder the wires. It's worthwhile making a note of where the wires are, but we won't in this case because I remember. So gently unsolder the wires, and we can see the fault straight away. As I started to unsolder the wire, that wire there has come away from here. Well, that's okay. That's what that means. I'm guessing that the end user has opened the light or messed around, or something's happened to it, and just by moving it, it's so. Just have a quick look at the circuit board. Now again, the circuit board is a difficult one. If you damage the circuit board, or the circuit board gets damaged, there isn't a replacement. So it's worthwhile This bit here, I would probably recommend you sort of send it back to me to be fixed on this one. But whilst I got it open, I might as well go through the process. So the circuit board is fixed in with this screw here, and I can simply undo that screw, he says, easily. Take that screw to one side, and I'm going to loosen the rest of the gland off so the cable can move inside, and then I can show you why it's best not to actually move this gland around too much. But we might as well show you the whole process. So this is a good opportunity to see the light in what I have to do to replace the power cable. So this comes all the way open. Might change that because that's been moved. Push that forward and we can see the light and the circuit board and everything inside. So the way this works is this bezel goes round. As I said, there's a magnet in here that's on the bezel there, and that magnet hits that switch there and just pulls that switch round. Very, very straightforward and simple, and that's all that's happening with the switches and the magnets, etc. So I can actually now test this in this position. So there's nothing connected. We just quickly have a quick look and make sure we didn't upset. It's worthwhile checking we haven't dropped, when you unsolder the wires, etc. we don't accidentally drop some solder across the joint and cause more damage. If I now, just going to push these out of the way, I can now reconnect the battery on here, and I can now move this manually. Light comes on, that circuit is now working, that's fine, and that's all that magnet's doing, is it's just rotating this silver switch all the way around. So as I was saying, it has to go in always into the fully off position, then turned into the on position, and then it will work. So the good news here is this bit that I can't obtain from Metalsub anymore, that's good, that's working. If that light comes on, that would indicate that the power is going on here. I can put a voltmeter across there to check that the power is there, but I would suspect that. Obviously, once I started disconnecting this part of the head, that there's a fuse in this part here. Just bring that into the light a bit more. A fuse in this wire here, and this wire has become disconnected from the fuse, which is maybe what the whole problem was in the first place. So I'm just gonna see if I can pop the heat shrink off, and there you can see the fuse. So all we're gonna do is pop a connection back onto the fuse. Okay. We'll pop the heat shrink back on, and that's got to be resoldered. But again, this may be where you want to give up and return it to me, but it depends on right, we've got a connection there, but not brilliant, so we're just going to make that Right, so that's the fuse connection made again. I should pop the, oh, and it's broken off again. So I'm going to replace the heat shrink with a new heat shrink so we can put that back on properly. Because that's going to be tricky. And so we just take some heat shrink and put it back on. This is maybe too small. Could get a slightly bigger one. Get a slightly bigger heat shrink. Red on this occasion, so that's quite nice. Okay, and we'll try, and it's very difficult to do this live, but still, let's have another go. Okay, give that a few seconds to settle. No, it's not going to. So we're going to try third time lucky. Problem is here, the fuse is snapped at the end. There's not much for me to solder onto. So I think we're going to have to rethink this, cut that back and restart that. See, it's nice to see that it goes wrong. So I'm just going to re-tin this wire. Again, you could just replace the fuse, which is probably not such a bad plan. Just going to re-tin the wire. There isn't too much to solder onto, but hopefully we'll get it fourth time round. Just going to tidy that up a bit. I'm not particularly happy with the cleanliness of that. No, that's not going to work. So I'm going to change my tact on this. Take the fuse off and see if we can reconnect the fuse. No. Just going to I think what's happened is the fuse wire snapped at the end, and I can't get a reasonable connection on there. So I'll take a copper wire, see if we can fix this particular fuse. I'm going to grab another holder here. You can't see what's going on here, but let's get that out of the way. Just going to grab a holder, see if I can fix the wire to the fuse here. Alright. So we're going to pause this video a minute. So we've ended up bypassing the fuse at the moment. So we're just going to retest the light and see if it's going to work. So we've got to reconnect the wires to the circuit board. Again, careful with this, make sure they go back in the right order before connecting the power. Have a look under the magnifying glass. I'm just going to check to make sure that I have got those correct and there's no splashes anywhere. So that seems to be the case, so that's all pretty good. Just going to clear some space. Now again, I can operate this without reassembly at this point, so we will do that. Can reconnect the power to the battery and switch the light on, and fortunately now we get a light onto the bulb. I'll bring that up and the light's on there. So the fault with this wire is the fuse wire had broken away. So I'm going to reassemble the light now, and then we will then reassemble and refit the actual new bulb that the customer sent us. So the fault with the actual light I'm going to put down to the fuse wire breaking in here. So I'm just going to tidy that up a little bit as best as I can. And so there's not a great deal I can do with these things. I don't really have that many spares to them, but they're quite easy to deal with. Right, next trick is to reassemble. So So this is going to be a good thing to look at, because this is the tricky bit, as in if I get this wrong it doesn't work anyway. So generally I will clean the light around here, make sure that's reasonably clean. There's a couple of marks there, so we'll get those off. We can also see inside this part, the housing, that there's an O-ring inside there, so that's the seal to stop it from water getting into there. So we can give that a good clean. Obviously we've got to be careful of the cable now, that we don't do any more damage to the cable or anything, but that's okay. And we can now apply, don't go crazy, but a smaller round of silicone grease onto the O-ring. But so you don't need to go mad with silicone grease. The O-ring should be shiny really, so just an even amount all the way around. And I'm going to put some silicone grease onto the part all the way around. Again, reasonably light coating. The extra will ooze out the side when we screw it back together again anyway, like this. Okay, so that's all prepared. I'm just going to pop. So this is the tricky bit. It's now getting everything back together. So in here, with these particular lights, this is why I would suggest that they come back to me to be dealt with, is we've now got to assemble all this. So to do this, I'm going to make life easier for myself and separate the two parts again, now that I know the light is working. So again, just to make it life easy, I've got to unsolder the head unit, because I can test the rest of it when it's all working fine. Put this back together again. So I need to insert this cable. I need the brown wire on this side and the blue wire on that side. Difficult to explain, but you'll see what I'm trying to do. Push this into the place here, and this is a housing on this, and then pull the cable down into the right place, and then push that down at the same time. I'm not quite sure you can see exactly what I'm doing. The LED will fit over to the LED hole, but the switch needs to be into the fully off position, and then we've got to pull the orange cable down into position. And really, this is why I say don't force too much of the cable through the housing, because you may get more cable than required, and then that will prevent the switch from rotating. Just going to push the sleeve down into place a little bit. That's better. And then see if we can. So the trick here is to get the right length of cable. So you want enough cable that the board sits correctly with the switch correctly, but there's not too much cable inside the housing. So it's a little bit of a trick to do. Reassemble the screw into position. Again, we don't need to be too tight. We can just check the O-ring and the rest of it to make sure we're happy that we haven't done anything there, and we can sort of fill that into place, and we can basically tighten this one up in a moment. So as I say, we can now test this to make sure we're correct before we do anything. Reconnect the power. I'm going to need the switch bezel now. Get that into the right position. Okay, so we've got to get the switch into the right position first, and we turn it on. It's not great. Hold on a second. So that's not coming on, so maybe we got the switch cable in the wrong position. So just going to pull that down a bit, see if the cable's being prevented from turning on. Just going to move out the light because I want to see. Okay, so something's not quite right there. Just going to make sure the board's seated properly, screwed in. Yep. So if it's not seated properly, it's a combination to get it spot on. Now we're on, and now we're off. So we're in the right positions now. So that's a little bit of a tricky thing to organise. And once we've got it into the right position, we want to nip this up so it sort of holds everything in place. We can tighten it up fully later on, but if we can keep the orange cable in the right position, so the cable's got to be correct there, the circuit board's got to be seated, so this switch has the ability to rotate correctly, come on, you can see the green lights on, and then go off again. So that's all working as expected now. So I'm just going to disconnect the power. I'm going to tighten that up a bit more as best I can. Obviously it's slipping in my hands anyway, so we're not really that well suited there. And I'm going to test it one more time, reconnect the power, and I'm going to get the switch back into the correct position. Light comes on, light goes off. Okay, so we're good, we're winning. Right, so we've got all the grease in the right place onto there. What I tend to do now is I put some silicone grease on the threads of the bolts, not too much, but it will ooze out over the top. So just get those prepared, 2 small ones, and they're just going to go into these holes here, so we can pop a bit over those, and we can see that one's already full up. Okay, now we've got to reattach the head unit, so we can do that. Again, you've got to get this the right way round, so it's not too difficult. It's just that you just need to make sure we're correcting what we're doing. Just going to need 3 hands for this. Still, we haven't got 3 hands, so we'll have to cope. So that's our control wire. This is our 0 volts wire, negative wire. And this is our positive wire. So again, as long as we haven't got anything else, we haven't changed anything else the wrong way around, which we know we haven't, then we're all good. Put the positive wire on. Again, I tend to have a quick look to make sure that I haven't drop solder anywhere, done any damage. That's all okay, and we're going to then feed the wires back into place here. Pop that on there. We've got to remove the bezel now and just line everything up, and we can then refit the 2 fixing bolts into place. Just nip them up for the moment. Tend to tighten up each side a little bit as we go, so it sort of levels nicely. Again, don't try not to over tighten these, because if we damage the bolts, it's quite hard work to get them back out again. So we're just going to nip up a little bit each side, and we'll probably see a little bit of the silicone grease coming out. Tighten those up. Let's tighten up nicely, and you can see that this is just still not level here, so we need to adjust that slightly. I'm not quite sure why that's not level. I'm going to check that. This bolt is not pulling quite level, so we're going to just open that up. Just make sure I've got that sitting on there nicely, and then readjust. So try that again. As you can see, there is a gap there. There's meant to be a gap there, but we're now pulling up nice and level both sides. And you see the silicone grease is starting to come out, so we know we're closed now. Just wipe that off. Clean that up. This can all be cleaned up. Now at this point we can actually nip the gland up a bit more. That's okay. So that's all into a fixed position. Obviously we've still got to put the other grommet in place, but we can now test the light and make sure we're working again. So I'm going to reconnect the power. Find the position, and the light comes on, and we can see the lights coming on underneath as well, but this is the power light which I'm looking at, and it will start brightening up, and we can then turn it off. So it's now in the off position, so we know now where the off position is. So the off position is there, so we find the latch. We can then reassemble the latch and make sure that's working, which it is. That goes into this hole here, if you can see that. Yeah, that's a bit better with the light. Try and move the light over. Pop the ball bearing onto the last position there. Make sure the spring is in there, going down onto the ball bearing, and that should, oh, didn't work. You can put a little bit of grease in there if you want to hold it in place, but I'm just going to pop that in, and that should in theory fit nicely over there. Once that's into place, we can bring back over this part, put that onto there. I tend to put a bit of grease on the fixing bolt, Put that onto there. And then we can nip that up. So hopefully we've now got a working HID200. Again, this light is probably 15-20 years old, so we can repair them, but it's a bit of a tricky thing. Make sure the switch is working in the correct position, which it is. Just make sure it's feeling correctly, which it is. That's no problem at all. Whilst we've now got something reasonable to hold on to, we can make sure the clamp's here. Again, try not to adjust that too much yourself, because the cable needs to be in a fixed position. Pop the gland on and the cover. Again, this has had a replacement cable at some point anyway, so that's why I haven't replaced the cable again. I try not to use up things unless I need to, but replacement cables aren't that expensive. It's just the time to do the job. As you can see, it's reasonably fiddly, and I don't do them as often now, and that's as tight as I want to go. I don't want to go so tight that I start clamping the cable too much. The light should now operate as normal, so I just have a quick clear up, and then I will then obviously test it in the water and make sure. So I now fix the battery power to it, turn the light on. We've got light coming out as we expected, no problems at all. Got good power light coming. Turn it into the off position and we switch off. So everything's working on the light, so I'm really happy with that. This is obviously my test bulb in here still, so I will undo that. I'll guarantee that the original bulb won't work, but I'll check it anyway because it's actually broken at the bottom there. But I'm going to pop that in and just see if it does work, just to be clear. So I just demonstrate removing the bulb again, but as I say, it's very unusual for it to be the bulb, and this light, the fault wasn't the bulb, the fault was that fuse wire in there. So cool to turn on there. Got these handy regulator cover removal clip, but anything spring wise that you can clip over there and pull it out and just lay it on the bench. Now this is my bulb, so I'm going to put this back in my test head before I forget, so I do know which is mine. Let's just rotate that into place, push it into place, and just a flat-headed end of a screwdriver, just lock it into place, and I'm just going to pop that away. Okay, I'm going to put the Phillips bulb back in, which is the original bulb that was in there. I don't know how damaged or not that is, so I'm just going to pop that in. Good. Lock that into place, and I'm just going to quickly test to see whether the bulb is dead or not. Turn that on, and funny enough, the bulb is working absolutely fine. So as I said from the beginning, very unlikely to be the bulb. Right, just for the sake of testing, pop a few bits away. 1 second. I'm going to test this particular bulb that the guy has bought from Halfords, I believe. It's a DS2 bulb. It's not the Philips version, I think it cost around about the £50 mark is what he said. So again, not too cheap, not the cheap ones, 2 for a £10 or something like that. So I would expect this to be a working thing. Pop that one out, and this is the Phillips bulb, which I would guess was the original bulb with the light. So that bulb could be somewhere in the region of 10-15 years old, maybe 20. Pop that one into place, which is the new bulb, just so I know whether it's a working one. Easy to obtain, I suspect, from Halfords. And lock that into place. Just going to test that one now. Connect the power back up. That's all that connected. Turn the light on, and hey presto, we've got another working bulb. So, and that's all very nice. So we know that this particular bulb that the guys bought from Halford is working. The original bulb, although broken at the end, is working, so it does show how robust the bulbs are. But again, I think I'll leave this new one in because he's already bought it, and send him this one back as a spare. And if he wants to watch the video, then he can also watch how to change it. So we'll just clean this end up here a little bit, and pop. Whilst we're here, we'll clean this up and clean the lens as best we can. You can use some alcohol wipes or glass clean in a spectacle, glass cleaning wipes and stuff like that. It will help the brightness get through a little bit if you've got smudge marks where you've got fingerprints on it or whatever. Pop some silicone grease on there. Again, not too much, only wants the thin layer of silicone grease around the O-ring. Try and get it all the way around. Just so the O-ring is slightly shiny. Then we can put the reflector back in. Careful not to damage the bulb. And then we can then just screw the bezel back on again. Now, I suspect that bulb got damaged because that one wasn't quite sitting home properly. And when we screwed the lid back on, or when the end user screwed the lid back on, it might have caught the end of the thing. That's nice and tight. Do a quick test, and then we're into putting the light into water buckets to see how long it's going to last for. Turn the light on. We've got the light coming through, so that's all good. Green light on there, so that's all power. So this is a very good indicator. Obviously that's an even better indicator because it's very clear that it's working. And you can see now the light is actually warming up and it's getting hotter and hotter. So I'm going to turn it off, and then I'm going to finish this video and go back to a water test. Thanks very much. Hope this was informative. Cheers.